Good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing? Good. Awesome. Tonight's speaker does not need an introduction, but I will try. Anyways, it is an honor to have worked on Dr. Jorgensen's campaign. I have been a libertarian for a long time, but this particular campaign was really important to me. Yes, I know we don't do the identity politics thing. It's not cool, but, big but, this time around it was really bad out there for anyone that is a libertarian, especially a woman. We had to listen as two men who had been accused of things were being sold to us as our only options. Many, many, many women feel victimized or have been victimized. And we got to hear how these are the only people that we could listen to and hear from and represent us. So it was a great honor to represent the only woman to be running this election cycle and the only one woman to have been on the ballot twice. Dr. Jorgensen's speech in her 1996 campaign, when she got the nomination, was one of the best speeches I've ever heard, if nobody has. If you haven't heard it yet, please go back and watch it. I think it is awesome. And she does talk a little bit about a sex line, so it's not exactly PG. That fire she had then, she had it on this campaign trail. It was an honor, again, to see it, to watch it happen, to watch her go out time and time again. I was there the day that she was bitten by a bat. Not when she got bitten, but in her campaign stop. And she went to the hospital and then went out and gave the speeches like a champ. And that's, well, they both did. They both had to do that. That is the job of campaigning. It's not pretty. But it's a lot of work, but they did it. And they did it for us, and they did it knowing that there was a really good chance that they weren't going to win. But they did it. And so I am so honored to bring onto the stage Dr. Jo Jorgensen.
Thank you for that. For the record, tonight, if you don't want to talk politics, we can talk football, hockey, cars, anything I'm interested in too. Bourbon. Okay, so maybe I do drink like a hockey player. And now we have a football connection because, at least for those of you in Jacksonville or who follow Jacksonville, because Trevor Lawrence, our beloved quarterback, who's never lost a regular season game in his life, high school through college, now is with Jacksonville. So I follow college football, not NFL, but I'll talk any kind of football. So just so you know, not limited to politics. So as you know, the media are not on our side. And just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, I went to Alaska. And the first night there, in fact, I had come straight from Florida. I was dressed for Florida, and I know. And so I'm out there because COVID, all of our speeches were outside, drizzling rain. Even the people from Alaska were wearing their coats and their hats. And I'm sitting there in a little thin cotton, something for Florida. And so then the next 2 days, luckily we went to much warmer weather in Juneau and Ketchikan. So while down there, I was interviewed by a reporter. And the campaign asked me a few days later, so you want to hear what they said about you in the newspaper? Like, oh no, go ahead. So the last two lines said something like, Dr. Jo Jorgensen says she loves Alaska and she would move here tomorrow if it weren't so cold. Today's temperature, 72 degrees. It's like, no, I'm not talking about the 72-degree weather. I'm talking about Wasilla when everybody was standing out there in the drizzling, freezing rain. So the point is, you know, we're used to the media kind of twisting our words when it comes to the Second Amendment or Social Security or whatever. They even twist it when it comes to the weather. So we have to find a way around them in order to be successful. So what we did in our campaign to overcome the media, the first thing we did was we went to social media, of course. And I'll give you a few numbers in a minute for that. Second thing we did was we got a bus. And I'd like to thank Jess Mears for this. A lot of people have asked me, so they painted your face on the side of the bus. Does that mean you get to keep it? Actually, no, it wasn't painted. That's plastic wrap. And so Jess is the one who investigated all of that. And I got to admit, I felt a little guilty driving around in that, because here we just had a little $3 million campaign, and we've got this, I always forget if it was a $500,000 or $1 million bus, but for anybody who knows anything about country and western, it was Luke Combs's bus when he was on tour. Anybody? Oh! Do you know, you are the first person that I've mentioned his story who's actually heard of him. I have discovered that libertarians aren't into country and western too much. So anyway, it was Luke Combs's tour bus. And by the way, the reason we got it is because all the venues were closed because of COVID, and so we got it really cheap because the bus company figures, well, we might as well rent it out cheap rather than having it just sit there doing no good at all. So we got it very cheap. Meanwhile, Gary Johnson, with his $12 million campaign, they were riding around in a little RV, so sometimes life just isn't fair, and that time it worked in our favor. But it did help us get the message out. We got to stop in little towns along the way, and when we started off in Pennsylvania, after the bat, when we would go to places, I'd talk about ending the Fed and everybody be clapping and cheering. And we thought, wow, these must be libertarians we're talking to, because, you know, most people don't even know what the Fed is. And so Jess Mears went out there one day and said, oh, what the heck? I'll just see if maybe any of them aren't Libertarian Party members. So she went out there with a stack, a handful of forms, and hey, who here is not a Libertarian Party member? And we were shocked that about 75% of them raised their hands. So we weren't preaching to the choir. We were getting the word out there. So back to social media. Now, keep in mind, we started at 0. I had not run recently. Now, I did run in 1996. However, typically the VP candidate doesn't get the mailing list, although it wouldn't have done me much good because we had like CompuServe numbers back then. Mine was 723, 6136, whatever. And I wasn't in office, wasn't a celebrity, and yet, starting from 0, we ended up in that short amount of time, the few months campaigning, over 206,000 subscribers, 40,000 donors, over 40,000, 10,000 volunteers, almost 500,000 Facebook followers, and close to 200,000 Twitter followers. And that's exciting in and of itself, but here are even more exciting numbers. If you look at our donors and people who helped with the campaign, 75% of the donors were new to the Libertarian Party. Brand new. And about 70% of the volunteers were new to the Libertarian Party. So Again, we were not preaching to the choir. We were, however, talking to many people who didn't even know you could have another chance. We were at one of the bus fuel stops, and the guy kind of noticed that was my face and asked me about it. I said, "Oh, yeah, running for president." And he said, "Oh, who are you running with, Biden or Trump?" And I said, no, I am running. And he goes, "You are?" And then he tells his friend, "Hey, come over here and take a picture of me with the person I'm going to vote for president." So it's like all they have to hear is there's another option, and the conversation turns a different way. So now, one of the things I am most proudest of is we came in second in numbers, both raw numbers as well as percentage of vote, out of any presidential run since the beginning of the party. We came in second, and we did that without watering down the message at all, not a single one. Immigration, healthcare, Second Amendment, drug war, not a single one. Our platform has remained virtually unchanged for over 40 years, and our statement of principles has remained virtually unchanged for almost 50 years. It's always for the individual. In fact, one of the few complaints I got when people would say, "Yeah, I didn't like your website," they would say, "Well, I really didn't see a platform." I would say, "Well, go to the Libertarian Party. The Libertarian Party platform is my platform." We didn't hide anything, and yet we came in second for the numbers. In fact, we got this, and if you want to know how far we took it, so Kate Prather, who rode the bus with us, she would help set up the events, and then she also was one with a little microphone, running around getting questions and answer, or the Q&A, and then she'd also fundraise. So whenever somebody would ask me about the Second Amendment and I would answer, Kate would say to me, "So, Joe, rumor has it you have an AK-47. And I would say, "Why, yes, I do." And then everybody'd clap and cheer. Now, I would explain to them, though, why I have an AK-47. I got it back in the early 90s when Bill Clinton told me I couldn't have one. And so they were just about to outlaw them. I've never actually shot it. Basically, I bought it because they didn't want me to have one. That's one thing that government hasn't figured out yet about how humans work. So now, running for president also meant me personally. I wanted to get across the message that I'm running for federal office, and so I shouldn't have anything to do with your everyday lives. Now, think back a year ago. One of the biggest issues was defunding the police, right? And people would ask me about it, and I would say, that's not what I'm running for. That's something that's local. Because not only do I want to spread libertarian philosophy and what we believe about issues, I also wanted to have people get the feeling that, okay, as an individual, as a citizen of this country, unless you're in the military, you should never, ever have any contact with the federal government ever. And so I tried to get that across too. And let me tell you, running last year with the defund the police movement, that was kind of hard. But not really, because again, I was trying to emphasize the libertarian answer. And I'd like to point out too that I now understand why Democrats and Republicans always cave for all these little issues. I was surprised at how many stops somebody would raise their hand and tell me, well, my aunt, my sister, my daughter, somebody has a mental illness, and our mental health system is broken. What are you going to do to fix it? And I can see why Democrats and Republicans would, let me reach in my back pocket and write out a government check. I'll try to help you. I'll try to do everything I can to help. And I had to tell them, here's what I can do to help, is keep the federal government out of it. And even though that might seem a bit harsh, I could do it with a clear conscience because I know that anytime the federal government gets involved in something, it makes it worse. And that is literally the best thing we can do to help people, is to let them keep their money and allow them to work at it at a local level and keep the federal government out. So our ideas work. And what's great is with libertarian philosophy, our ideas are both moral and practical. They're what's right, and they work well. We just need to present it in a way that people understand and that they get excited about, to show them how we can better their lives. And the good news is, as we saw getting the second highest vote totals, we don't need to have an entertainer, a celebrity, somebody with thousands of followers, or somebody from another party to spread our message. Our idea is good enough that we can do it ourselves, purely libertarian, if we just talk about it in the right way. Now, of course, you need money to run a campaign. I'm sure you've heard that money is the mother's milk of politics. So that's going to take me to my final numbers, which I'm really excited about, although I give Steve Dasbach complete credit for this. He was the campaign manager. So looking at cost per vote, if you look at raw numbers, 2000 was the most expensive campaign. For every libertarian vote, the campaign essentially paid $5.73. By the way, that was Harry Brown's campaign, second campaign, not the one with me. And they started really early. And perhaps they started a little too early because they had spent a lot of money on infrastructure. And then we jumped down into the more reasonable numbers. So there are a lot of them at $3 and something. And then you get down to, there are several of them at $2 and something. And then you get down to 1976, $2.24. Now keep in mind, 1976, that was a long time ago in terms of government inflation. So $2.24 meant a lot more back then than it does now. And then we arrive at 2020, $1.83 a vote. So we came in second while also spending the least per vote of any presidential election. And then if you look adjusted for inflation, now we get to 1980 and it's over $11 a vote. And then again, we get into the $8, $7, and then we do get down to some of the $3. And then of course us at $1.83. So it doesn't matter whether you look at it as adjusted for inflation or with just raw dollars. Either way, we get it. So now I'd like to close. A lot of people ask me, so how can we grow the party? How can we get more people in? Well, I was really fascinated by one of our campaign fundings. What we would do is we would sell a special ticket out on the campaign trail. So if you wanted, for $250, you could come in and get a tour of the bus and chit-chat with all of us and take a look around. And I figured, well, these must be, diehard libertarians who have been around for a long time. I was shocked because I started asking a lot of these fairly young people, so how long have you been with the party? And I'm expecting, 5 years, 10 years, long-time member. I couldn't believe how many people said, oh, just a month. One guy said, I never heard of you before 3 weeks ago. And I was like, really? Well, how did you get to the party? I'm all ears. I want to hear this. Well, he said that he had a friend who on Facebook kept putting these really annoying memes of me. And so he just kept ignoring them. And finally he was like, all right, what the heck? I'll go ahead and look at one. And he looked at one. It was me, the Libertarian Party, and the rest is history. So if you want to know how to grow the party, annoy your friends. That's my advice for tonight. So thanks so much. I think I have time for questions, right?
The first one's always the bravest.
Yes.
Do you think an anti-war message is effective in a presidential campaign?
Oh, yeah, very. And in fact, so I hate to even, what? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, is an anti-war message effective? Yeah, first of all, let me mention, I was surprised at how many veterans were showing up. And pretty much every stop. I would say that was the biggest self-identified group who would show up. And they would say, yeah, it's messed up. But I'm not sure I should even tell you this story, but I got it from pretty good authority, so I think it's true. But somebody said that the bus owner that we rented the bus from said that Donald Trump Jr. had gone to the company because they wanted to rent a bus and basically follow us. So they were apparently watching us, and I noticed that after I was out there talking about anti-war, I noticed that that's when Trump started stepping up his speech. So I hate to sound like, oh yeah, Trump's paying attention to me, but according to the bus driver, they were, and I did notice a change in the conversation. So, and that's how we can change laws too, and how we can just affect any kind of change is by changing the conversation that they're having. Yes?
Y'all are just going to hear from me a lot tonight. Joe, along those lines, 2 points. It's Happy Women Veterans Appreciation Day. So this was the day that women were included equally in the armed forces. But you mentioned that, the campaign attracted many veterans. I'm a military family member. I work closely with veterans. When we think about these opportunities to engage people who either don't know the libertarian message, the party, or the principles, I was a first-time libertarian voter. I started a whole damn organization. Where did you see the most traction with people new to the party? Was it anti-war? Was it marijuana? Where did you find the most traction?
Yeah, personally, I did find the anti-war message really rung out. Also, healthcare. And I made that one of the top priorities because healthcare is a life or death situation. And when I would explain it as, look at your car insurance. Your car insurance doesn't pay for gas, oil, car washes. Imagine if it did. There'd be absolutely no reason for you to shop around for the best prices and no reason for gas companies gas stations to compete on price. And so they just keep increasing prices, and then your premiums get increased the following year. And so many people are like, wow, I never thought about it that way. And so it's like, well, that makes perfect sense. So I think a lot of people were really like, oh, finally, there's something that absolutely makes sense. And when I recorded a message that was going to a more Republican libertarian audience, I even said, I'll give Trump credit when Mayor Koch couldn't get the ice rink built, the Woolman rink. What did he do? He said, I'll do it. And the first thing he does is call up his friends in Canada and say, hey, how do you build an ice rink? I want to know how to do it. And I said, why doesn't Trump do the same thing for healthcare? All he has to do is look at Singapore, see what they're doing. And I'm sorry? Yeah, and copy them at least as a first step to get into a totally free market. Hey.
It was fairly recently that I heard about Robert David Steele and the Arise USA tour, which started May 15th going till September 6th, and their purpose, is this working? The purpose is to kill the duopoly, vote the duopoly out, and then let the Libertarians and the Greens and the other parties rise up. And I'm curious whether you, Spike, people in the room have heard about that or not. They're coming to Tampa in August.
Yeah.
Rise USA tour.
Yeah, basically people trying to squash the duopoly. No, I haven't, but I can tell you an interesting interview I had with a high school student, and I know everybody's like, okay, you're running for president, maybe not talk to the, maybe not spend time with the high school students, and I'm like, no, I want to get them young. In fact, when I was running for VP, what I would do is I would ask them to have a local high school, see if they would let me speak there to kind of warm up before the real talk. And this high school student's interviewing me and asking me typical questions. And then he said, it seems to me like what libertarians should do is try to change the laws so that we're no longer a two-party state. So then you have a chance. And I said, exactly, just do that. And I said, we're not a two-party state. That's why we're on the... And he was just like, oh, really? I mean, it was like he was some reporter getting this big scoop, the fact that we're not a two-party political system. So we got a long ways to go. Yeah. Thanks.
Anyway, they have 6 buses, and they're going to all 50
Well, that's 5 more than I had. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Hi, Joe. First of all, thank you for a lifetime of service to liberty. I really appreciate it. As you can probably hear from my accent, I'm an outsider. Coming from Scotland to America and being a part of the libertarian community, I've seen that this is, without a doubt, the greatest community in the world. I feel like when we come together at these conventions, we really feel our power and we see what we're like together. But some of us, myself included, we sometimes worry that we're just talking to ourselves. Oh, we're going to do a fundraiser. Well, the fundraiser is to fund professional libertarians or speaking to libertarians, right? Can you please tell us, 1, give us some hope that we're not just talking to ourselves, and 2, tell us a little bit about the strategy, because, all of the philosophy has been laid down by whatever your favorite libertarians are, whether it's Murray Rothbard Rand or someone less controversial than those two, Harry Brown. We've got the philosophy. How are we doing messaging, and how are we getting beyond the choir to those people who have not heard the message and are open to the message? Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, first of all, and I'm not going to repeat that long question, but it's about basically we go to conventions, get excited, and then how do we grow from there? So I got to tell you, I had the same experience. The first time I went to a national convention was in 1991, and I remember telling all my friends about, the libertarians, these are the greatest people. There's some guy in a 3-piece business suit next to some guy wearing, flip-flops and a T-shirt, and they're all getting along. I mean, yes, we fight about where the commas go, but the guy in the 3-piece business suit thinks the other guy should be able to smoke pot, and the guy, in the flip-flop says, sure, you can, pay your employees whatever you want. I said, this is just so awesome. And I really thought I was changing the world by helping decide where to put the commas. And then Monday, I walk out into the streets and I see, nothing has changed. It still looks the same. So, but this is exactly why I joined People for Liberty. Now, and I don't know if you heard me talk last night, but it's the only organization that's dedicated to grassroots. And they're the ones who started, I don't want to repeat the whole thing because I mentioned it last night, but they did the Let Her Speak, which was such an overwhelming success. Most people thought that was our campaign doing it, and it wasn't. It was people who were brand new to the Libertarian Party, had never voted Libertarian, deciding to take action. And so that's why I joined People for Liberty, because it's trying to bring action about. And if you think about it, we need a free market in liberty, just like we say we should have a free market when it comes to buying gas at the gas station or buying clothes or going to restaurants, in that the Libertarian Party cannot do everything, and we need to have competing groups out there trying to figure out the best way to spread the message. And if a way works, they're going to attract more donors, more people. If it doesn't work, then they're going to go to the wayside. So we can't rely on the Libertarian Party itself for all of it, because that's their job is more specific to political campaigns. What we need to do is change the minds of people and grow a movement. Thanks.
Hi, Joe. So as a young person who wants to become more involved in politics, I often find myself, I find it difficult to bring forward the principles of libertarianism to people my age, 18 to 21, because they often see the Libertarian Party as conservative. And older people that I know often see the Libertarian Party as too radical. So how can I bring that message across of libertarianism, the principles of libertarianism?
Yeah, so basically it's a sales job, and we have to look at it that way. And that's what I advocated for when I was running for the nomination, because I had gone through sales training at IBM. And I really think that we made a mistake in the 1970s and 1980s, going around saying, it's my body, it's my money, you can't touch it. Well, then we just got labeled as being selfish. So we need to flip it around and say, okay, what's your problem? What do you need help doing? And basically tailor your message. In fact, I've had people ask me, so what's your 2-minute libertarian elevator speech? I don't have one. I would start by asking questions like, what do you think the problem is? Where do you think we need change? What's going on? To find out what the problem is. And the cool thing about libertarianism, it doesn't matter what it is, we have a better solution. We just have to find out what their problem is and tailor it to their problem, tailor it to what they want. Thanks. And let me throw in one last thing too. And again, I'm here to talk about the campaign tonight, not People for Liberty. But you can look at it this way. If you are a candidate and you're running for office, and you try to trap somebody to tell them how great your campaign is, how they should donate money, how they should vote for you, that's kind of like walking into a department store or walking to a car lot to buy a car, and you've got the salesperson trying to pitch to you, right? And they're trying to pitch to you, so you're kind of in defensive mode. But if you do it through a non-political means, such as People for Liberty, such as Advocates for Self-Government, such as some of these other things. And if you're approaching it from, okay, I'm just a person who loves liberty and I'll just tell you about it, as opposed to, okay, I'm the salesperson from the firm, then maybe they might be a little more open to it rather than, making it sound like you're trying to make the pitch or make the sale. Yes?
Looking back, where you have played marching with the BLM any differently?
I didn't march with the BLM. Okay. No, so what I did, I spent one day with former preacher in Oklahoma. I was there with a Black Lives Matter leader, and I spent all day with him. And basically, we just had a conversation, just as I was suggesting you do, a conversation. And a wonderful black guy, he had turned his life around. He had been in crime, he had been in prison, and now he was a preacher trying to make the world better. And I said, oh, so you're in prison, huh? And yeah. I said, tell me about that. And then I said, so I guess you're not allowed to own a gun, are you? And he's like, no, I'm a felon now. And I said, well, the Libertarian Party believes that just because you go to prison doesn't mean you lose the right to protect your life. And he's like, really? It was a message he had never heard before. And I said, absolutely. If you are convicted and you do your time, and, if you're not dangerous enough that you need to be locked up and you're out on the streets, absolutely, you have the right to defend yourself. And he said, huh. And then when we were talking more about the free market, I asked him, I said, the story of Rosa Parks, right? He said, oh, yeah, of course. I said, but did you know that was a government-owned, government-run bus that she was told to sit in the back of? And he said, no. And I said, only the government can discriminate like that and get away with it. In the free market, a company could never do that because at the time, like 60% of the bus ridership were blacks. And imagine if Uber discriminated against 60% of their customers. They would go out of business as well they should. And he said, yeah, you're right. So basically, I spent the day with him, and he came as my guest to the Oklahoma State Convention to dinner that night and just met people and kind of listened to what we had to say. But it was basically us talking. And the way I looked at it is a lot of people in Black Lives Matter, they see a similar problem than we do. They just have the wrong solution. I even told the guy, I said, you know what I don't understand about Black Lives Matter is you want more government to fix a problem that government caused. Like, why would you go to them? And so he said, yeah, that makes sense too. So basically it was a dialogue. But no, I never marched in a parade because I would never represent myself with them. And it's just a matter of some people don't want to listen to you. If somebody shares the problems that you can solve and they're willing to listen to me, I'll talk to them. So it's a matter of we're halfway there because they see the problem. Thanks. I guess that's it. Oh, sorry.
Essentially, I would like to know, like, what your people specifically feel about, like, barriers to, like, specifically starting a business. Because I see that as, like, increasingly being an issue. The United States is actually quite hard to set up a business. So one thing I think that the Libertarian, Libertarian Party should, like, really focus on is, like, building infrastructure and, like, allowing people to be autonomous. So once you think specifically, like, for example, in Florida, like, there's a lot of people talking about, like, tech and finance and physically blockchain. There's a lot of people in Miami that, like, you know, all around Florida, they're, like, really pushing for, like, you know, the barriers to entry to this, you know, to business owners in this industry be, you know, clarified and negated. I just kind of wanted to know your opinion on what your strategy is to basically remove the barriers to entry for people to start their own businesses and get into these emerging industries like in tech and finance and blockchain.
Okay, yeah, barriers to entry for businesses. In fact, that's something else I mentioned to the BLM guy. I said, by the way, do you know what it takes to start a business? And he said, oh yeah. And I said, did you know that they don't allow hair braiders to, like, you can't braid other people's hair and collect money unless you go through possibly thousands of dollars of training. And oftentimes you're paying that money to your competition. So, you know, there's a fancy hair salon in place. They're the ones who are entrenched, and like they need your money, you got to pay money to them. And he looked at me and he said, but hair braiding is cultural. I said, exactly. And yet the government thinks that you guys should have to have some kind of business license. So that was something else that he was interested in. So a lot of those are at the state and local levels. And if I were running for a state or local office, that is something absolutely that I would focus on. And wherever I were running, I would come up with specific examples and even maybe specific people so that this mother of two who's saying, I'm trying to support my two kids, but I can't afford childcare, and have her story, because stories really work with people. And that's one of the reasons that Ronald Reagan was so successful in convincing people that he would, you know, little Johnny, you know, on his way to school. Now, of course, the problem with Ronald Reagan was that the stories could be used on him, and so he gave us bigger government every year. But stories work with people. Anecdotal stories are moving, they're emotional, and people vote on emotions. So absolutely, that is one thing I would go after running for a state or local office. Okay, well, thank you. Oh, yes, another question? I think we have the room till midnight.
I'm just asking, what in your view should libertarians or the Libertarian Party, whichever way you prefer, be telling people the role of government is? Should they be defense, police, and whatever? Should it be zero government? Should it be a little bit of welfare? Like, what should the Libertarian Party be saying the role of government is?
I try to not come up with an exact end, because then that gives that person more to disagree on. I try to find common ground, find out how liberty can help them, and then I say, let's head down that path. Because otherwise, then you get into kind of sounding like a lawyer and more of a philosopher. And that's one thing that I really tried hard to do with the campaign, is to not get into the philosophy of, my government, or my body, but instead say, you can't afford health care. Your kids are going to a high-priced school, when they could be going to a so-called private school for less money. Wouldn't you like your life to be better? And kind of keep the philosophy out of it. Thanks. Okay. Oh, yes.
Yeah, I'm formulating the question, but you're touching on something pretty interesting there. The world that all us libertarians live in is philosophical and rather esoteric.
Yep.
We'll just bitch for hours on it. The people out there, they respond emotionally.
Yep. Exactly.
How did you resonate on an emotional level, intentionally? I mean, how did you script your message so that it would resonate emotionally?
Well,
One or two examples.
yeah, so I've got a PhD in psychology, not clinical, but I teach psychology. So for instance, I know that a lot of people think, they say, oh, psychologists say that change is painful, that people don't like change. Actually, it's not the change that people mind, it's the uncertainty. And they're afraid of the uncertain. So when I would talk about immigration, I would say, I'm the granddaughter of immigrants. My grandparents came over here to make a better life for themselves. And my grandmother used to tell me how awful it was in the old country, that the government would take all your money and you couldn't start your own business. And I would say that's what I want to return to, is the immigration policies of 100 years ago when my grandparents came over. So now it's like not new. It's not scary. Oh, we did it 100 years ago. So it's more familiar. So I would try to find some common ground and make it as palatable and unscary and something that they would not think, oh, it's new. Because, yeah, libertarians, it's like, oh, all this new stuff. It's like, no, we just want to go back to, when immigrants came over 100 years ago, like my grandparents. Oh, yeah, okay. That makes sense. Thanks. By the way, notice also that's a story, and people like stories. Well, thank you so much. Great audience. I really appreciate it. And again, thank you for trusting me with the position of representing you. I really appreciate it.